Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing another, what I like to call, underrated multi-class combo. You guys really seem to like the last one, the Shadow Monk Archfey Warlock, as that is one of my most popular videos in a long time, so I thought I'd kind of show off another somewhat unorthodox combination, and today we're going to be looking at Barbarian and Paladin. Now, Barbarian and Paladin come with the very obvious synergy of the fact that Divine Smite is not actually a spell. Yet. We're not at the 2024 rules yet. So you can use Divine Smite while raging. So that begs the question, is it worth multiclassing Paladin and Barbarian at all in any way? And the answer for a lot of people would probably be no, because, you know, most of the fun of being a paladin, yes, is Divine Smite, but another half of it is the fact that you do get to cast a lot of really interesting, unique spells. And also the multi-classing ability score stats can be a bit weird, because you want Strength, Dex, Con, and Charisma, because you can't wear heavy armor with Barbarian, as you won't be able to rage, so you have to wear medium armor or less, which means that you at least want a dexterity score of 14, so the ability scores can be a bit tricky, and that was the case with this build. However, I think with a bit of finagling, you can definitely make this work, and I actually found some unexpected synergy between a couple of subclasses, so I think you guys are going to enjoy this one, and I hope you look forward to it. But before we get right into the build, I want to pose a quick question to you all. What else do you want to see me do on this channel? I'll be honest, we're coming up to 200 build videos. My next build video is going to be number 200, and I'm going to be doing something for that build video that I've never done before on the channel, and no, it's not a modded class or subclass that hasn't been in the game before. It's been something that's in the game since day one, and I've never done it. I'll be interested to see who can figure out what that is before tomorrow, so let me know in the comments if you have. But obviously I've had some requests for me to do mod showcases where I just focus on showing off the functionality of a mod, which I could potentially do. There's also tier list rankings or such like that if you guys want me to cover certain topics, other sort of discussion videos. Let me know what you'd like me to do on this channel, because obviously we're getting to 200 builds at this point, and I'd love to keep covering BG3 and tabletop, but maybe we need to shake things up a little bit. This weekend I'm going to be having a very different video come out, because I'm going to be having a video where I went back over all 200 builds and pulled some interesting statistics from them, like which classes and subclasses are used the most and the least, which feats I took the most, which races I used the most, a few other things like that. You know, just a bit of fun, and when we can kind of have an open discussion about, you know, why certain choices were made across my channel. So I think you guys are going to enjoy that video as well. It's something new and experimental that I'm trying, and I'm hoping to have that out for you guys this weekend, but I wanted it to come out after 200 builds, so, you know, it kind of made sense to release it. Anyways, I'm done ranting and raving now. Let's get into the build. We're going to be kicking things off as a Barbarian today. Now, the biggest problem with the Barbarian Paladin multiclass is deciding which levels to take in what first. You're going to want to get extra attack from either or, but it really depends on how you want to play the game. Do you want to play as more of a Barbarian or more of a Paladin? Now, obviously, I've called this build the Zealot. This is obviously inspired by the Zealot Barbarian, which basically is a Barbarian Paladin. It gets its own version of Divine Smite being able to add radiant damage to their attacks, and so I kind of use that for inspiration here. And so I definitely think I at least do want to have rage early on, so we're going to be starting off as a Barbarian. This is going to get us a pretty nice dollop of hit points at first level, being 14, as well as the fact that we're going to be able to use rage right off the bat, dealing an extra 2 damage with melee and improvised weapons and throwing, and also giving us resistance to physical damage, advantage on strength, and advantage on strength checks and saving throws. Overall, you're getting all the basic bits of rage right away at level 1, so even if we go the rest of the way Paladin here until we multiclass back into Barbarian, you're still going to have that basic option to rage when necessary. And I do think that might be the best way to progress this build. Grab rage as a level 1 Barbarian, go the rest of the way Paladin, so at least you're kind of playing that natural progression of a Paladin, even though there will be 1 level delayed, and then once you've finished your Paladin levels, come back to Barbarian for the rest, for the higher HP, and the other stuff that we're going to be getting in a bit. So, with Rage, obviously we get all that fun stuff. We're also going to get Unarmored Defense. We're not going to be using that with this build, because again, the stats on this one are a bit awkward. There will be ways to finagle it for the optimizers in the audience, which I will be getting into when I choose the stat allocations, but this is a good general spread for people who just want to play casually. Speaking of, let's talk about the race, actually, before we get to the ability scores. I've decided to play this one as a Zariel Tiefling, because what is more zealous than a devil in a church? Because again, I'm kind of playing this character as a member of a religious order, a literal zealot within a church that maybe actually goes out and smites heretics and has a bit of an anger issue and maybe a bit of a drinking problem. More on that later. So I liked the idea of making a character, because this was originally going to be a duo build, but the other half of the duo I think needs some tweaking before I release that, probably next week. It's an Inquisitor, so look forward to that. And it's kind of meant to be paired with this one, but I kind of like the idea of just focusing on the Zealot for this video. So again, once we kind of get out of the level up screen, you'll see how I've kind of used camp clothing to make them look a bit more like a standard church member or a priest that is just ready to smite a motherfucker if necessary. So I think it's going to be quite fun. But yeah, so we've gone with Tiefling for that, because again, Zealot, oh my goodness, my voice. 1 second. There we go, that's better. Oh, that was weird. Anyways, so we, again, Devil in the Church, kind of a Zealot's thing. I kind of like to pick that out. But we're also going to get Dark Vision and Fire Damage Resistance, which I think is quite nice. I also went with the Zariel Tiefling, because that is going to give us Smite spells later on that we can use without spending a spell slot, as well as the Thaumaturgy cantrip at level 1 here, which allows us to gain advantage on Intimidation and Performance checks. The Intimidation, I think, works especially nice for Barbarian, because Barbarian Intimidation checks in social situations are some of the funniest in the game. Seriously, play a Barbarian with a bit of charisma and you're going to have so much fun. And Thaumaturgy is going to help with that. It's also a cleric cantrip, so I felt like that kind of made sense for this build. We get a little bit of cleric utility without actually being a cleric, so that's kind of nice. So I personally recommend Zariel Tiefling for this build, but use whatever you like. Next, on to the ability scores. Yeah, I know these don't look great, and to be honest, they're not. It does leave a bit of room for improvement, so for those of you that know what to do and feel like you can swap out pieces of equipment here, go for those Gloves of Dex, go for that Amulet of Greater Constitution when you get to Act 3, go for those Potions of Hill Giant Strength, grab the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, do everything you can to optimize this to the way you want to play it. Do you want more Charisma? Do you want more Constitution? Do what you like to do. Disgusting Hair of Auntie Ethel, whatever strikes your fancy. But for the kind of general stat spread for a casual playthrough, here's what we can go with. Strength is at 16, as it is going to be our main attacking stat, but if you want to use a finesse weapon, you can drop this entirely and go for Dexterity instead, entirely up to you. Dexterity is at 14, we're going to be wearing medium armor with this build that doesn't gain any sort of uncapping of the Dex modifier, so having a 14 is going to get us the maximum amount of AC possible out of medium armor. Constitution is at 14, would like this a bit higher, but with our big Barbarian hit die and our Paladin hit die, which is pretty good as well, we are going to have a decent chunk of HP when all is said and done, even if we keep our Constitution at 14. And we're not really going to be focusing on concentrating on spells, because we're going to be raging quite a lot, so we don't really need a high Constitution score for that. But again, if you wanted to go unarmored on this build, you might want to shimmy this one around. Intelligence is at 8, we don't need it. Wisdom is at 12, because I kind of had to do the stats a bit differently than normal to kind of get it so we don't have like an odd stat. If you don't care about your wisdom, and I kind of do, I'll be honest, it is an important stat to have for saving throws, then I would say you could put this maybe at 10 and bump, or at 9 and bump your charisma up to a 14, which might be better offensively, but those wisdom saving throws can be kind of nasty, so having a little bit of a chance against them is at least good. So I would recommend a 12-12 split on Wisdom and Charisma. Again, our Charisma is mainly going to be only used for utility spells. And while we do get Aura of Protection with this build, and yes, with 12 Charisma, it would only give us a +1 to our saving throws, which, again, you can adjust if you feel like it's necessary. This will still be good enough to kind of get what we want and still have that little bit of Charisma to do those Barbarian Intimidation checks. But of course, like I said, I've already gone over the multitude of options you can go through to optimize your stats if you so choose. Now, I obviously recommend playing this build as the Dark Urge. I think the Dark Urge could make a zealous, drinking churchman. What do they call them again? Priest. Yeah, let's go with that. Pretty interesting to play. I think part of their zealotry could be the influence of you-know-who, so maybe that could be quite a fun way to go. So we've got the Haunted One background here, giving us Medicine, which kind of makes sense for a church person, and Intimidation, which again we want for those Barbarian Intimidation checks because they are funny as hell. So we can also go for our Barbarian proficiencies, we can go for Athletics and Perception. Right, that's level 1. let's move on. Right, next up, I think I'm going to do what I said and go for our levels in Paladin next. You could kind of be a bit greedy and go for level 2 of Barbarian here to get Reckless Attack, which will synergize with some stuff we're getting later. Spoilers, it's Great Weapon Master, because of course we are. So, but I'm going to multiclass into Paladin here. Paladin is going to give us a bunch of interesting things at level 1, namely we're going to get Lay on Hands to be able to give ourselves a bit of healing. Not a spell, can be used in Rage, but we also do get to choose our subclass. And this is where it gets interesting. I would say you can pick any. Which is weird, because I did say, oh yeah, we got a subclass that has some nice synergetic features, but honestly, you can pick any of these. Barbarians are quite inherently connected to nature, so Oath of the Ancients would make sense. It would give you even better healing, which again can be great for a self-sustaining barbarian, since this uses our bonus action, so you could actually get a lot out of this. And if you decide to go for a 5-7 split instead of the 6-6 split I'll be showing off in this video, you would actually get the ability to become resistant to spell damage, so that could make you an even more tanky barbarian. So an Oath of the Ancients Paladin may be in the works for the future. Oath of Devotion, in my opinion, is the overall weakest subclass when it comes to this game. Other than the fact that you do get Sanctuary, which is absolutely busted, the rest of the features of this I don't really like. But again, if you want to play this idea of this overly devoted Zealot who gets a bit more radiant damage stuff, then you absolutely could go for Oath of Devotion and it would be quite fun. I just do think that other than Sanctuary, the expanded spell list is a bit meh. So up to you if you want to go with that. Oath of Vengeance, we know Oath of Vengeance, it's bloody good. I've already talked about potentially pairing this build with an Inquisitor, so getting the ability Inquisitor's Might does make a bit of sense. So, and also, obviously, you get Oath of Vengeance, which gives you, like, the ability to gain advantage, and blah, 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 blah. So if you want to go with that, you can. But, in my testing, I did decide to try out, for real, Oath of Conquest. This is a new subclass added via the Oath of Conquest mod that is available to all platforms, including console, and it gives us another fun archetype to play when it comes to the Paladin, and that is about spreading fear. While Oath of Vengeance does have some fear aspects to it, and so does Oathbreaker, which is another option for this build if you want to go down that route, Oath of Conquest just feels rather zealous, you know. I quite like it, and it's going to give us some unique abilities, which I'll get to explore further in this video. First up, you will get the ability Chosen Adversary, allowing you to mark an enemy as the focus of your zealous pursuit. See what I did there? You have advantage on attack rolls against the target, and when you hit them with a melee attack, they might become frightened until the end of their next turn, or when they take damage. Activated as a bonus action, and it lasts for 3 turns. Very, very fun early game ability that can really turn up the heat in battle. And again, playing with, like, again, you're going up against this church member who is so violent and zealous with their barbarian rage. Of course it makes sense to inflict fear with the very attacks that you do. Like, come on, I just think it's too cool. But again, if you're playing vanilla and you don't really want to explore the Oath of Conquest, Vengeance, Oathbreaker, Devotion, and Ancients all work brilliantly. So it's a pick your favorite situation, but I do like Oath of Conquest for this build specifically. As for the tenets of Conquest, basically you just got to be a conqueror. Give your enemies absolutely zero hope. Kind of fun. At Paladin level 2, yes, this is where it all starts kicking off. We get Divine Smite. Again, not a spell, can be used within Rage, adding extra radiant damage to our attacks. We're also going to gain a Fighting Style, and since we are two-handing a weapon with this build, let's go with Great Weapon Fighting to give us a bit more damage per swing. With our race as well, we're going to be getting Searing Smite at this level. It's a concentration spell, and obviously it is a spell, so we can't use it while raging, but hey, it's not going to take up one of our spell slots, and we can use it once per long rest, so if you just happen to not be raging at the time, maybe give it a go. We also do get to prepare 3 spells, and again, this is where it gets a bit tricky. We can't really take anything that uses our concentration, as it won't stay up if we decide to rage. However, you can play this build as if it has 2 modes, so you can kind of have your non-rage variant and then your rage variant. Just be warned that any spell you cast is going to use up those spell slots that we're going to want for smites, and because we're not going fully into Paladin, excuse me, on this build, you're not going to have as many spell slots as you normally would. Some stuff we're going to be getting later is going to help mitigate this to some regard. Just be careful with what you decide to pick. However, some interesting options can include Cure Wounds, giving yourself a bit of healing. Again, this is a spell, you won't be able to activate it while raging, but if you want to patch yourself up after a rage, this might help you out. Again, very situational. Again, if you pair this with the build that I'll probably be making a duo for this. Again, the Inquisitor, which is going to have cleric levels, which is going to have healing. You might not see too much value in any of these spells, so maybe just save it for smite. But command, also a fun spell, can force creatures to run away from you, which would synergize with some Oath of Conquest features. However, you do actually get this later as part of the Oath of Conquest spell list, so you can unprepare it later and pick something else. And then finally, for your last one, I mean, Compelled Duel can also work. It's really a pick your favorite type situation. At Paladin level 3, we're going to be getting our level 3 Conquest features, namely Guided Strike. You may strike with supernatural accuracy, gaining a +10 bonus to an attack roll at the cost of one of your Channel Oath charges. An overall fun ability. It's War Priest ability, basically, which kind of does the same thing, but hey, this is going to offset some Great Weapon Master stuff that we're going to be getting later, because you know Great Weapon Master comes with that penalty. This is another way of getting around it that doesn't require you to use Reckless Attack, making it so enemies have advantage to hit you. So, you may find this feature useful. The more useful feature is Conquering Presence. Exude a terrifying presence, causing nearby enemies to become fearful of you. Afflicted creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success. Basically, spend a Channel Oath charge, and boom! Everyone around you could potentially be frightened, which will trigger some other abilities and such like that. Again, the whole idea is that you are such a violent individual that people just are naturally afraid of you, so I quite like getting this feature here. And we also get two really awesome spells, the aforementioned Command, but also Armour of Agathis. Armour of Agathis is great for this build because it gives you temporary hit points and retaliates with cold damage against anyone who attacks you. So you can quickly cast this, and since it doesn't require concentration, it'll stay up while you rage. Unfortunately, this will drop off into kind of the mid to late game, as its overall utility is going to be diminished because you can't upcast it that high, but in this early game and into the mid game as well, just having that bit of temporary hit points before you go into combat can be really, really nice. You never know when that 5 damage may be the difference between life or death, so you might as well have it. But again, Command would probably be overall more useful here, so feel free to swap it out for something else. The game has given us Thunderous Smite, which is on theme for some equipment we'll be using later, so we'll keep that. At Paladin level 4, we are going to gain access to our next racial ability, which is Branding Smite once per long rest. We're also going to gain access to another spell, and the game has chosen Ceremony. Sure, that's kind of funny. Next up, we do get to choose our next ability, and I would say it's up to you if you want to go for the ability score improvement to bump up your strength to 18 here, which is what you're definitely going to want to do, or pick up Great Weapon Master. I would say you can pick up Great Weapon Master now if you grab the Potion of Everlasting Vigor to give your strength a +2 here, basically giving you the best of both worlds and optimizing your stats a bit further for a bit more experimentation later. Or if you're using Potions of Hill Giant Strength anyway, then definitely pick up Great Weapon Master at this level. And in fact, with the amount of different ways we have to get advantage with this build, I would say that you wouldn't actually be you wouldn't have too much difficulty overcoming the penalty of Great Weapon Master, so maybe even with your strength at 16, so maybe it's worth it. But Great Weapon Master allows you to, whenever you land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon, you can make another melee weapon attack as a bonus action that turn. And attacks with melee weapons you are proficient with and are wielding in 2 hands can deal an additional 10 damage at the cost of a -5 attack roll penalty. Because we have so many different ways of gaining advantage and ways of boosting our chance to hit as well, that we'll be getting later on, Great Weapon Master is pretty much always going to work. So I would say you could probably pick this up now pretty safely. At Paladin level 5, we're going to be getting extra attack, as well as access to level 2 spells. We get Hold Person, which if we decide not to rage, can actually be a very useful thing, making it so our attacks are always critical hits and then mobilizing an enemy, which means we could basically just pick a humanoid enemy and kill them outright. We also gain access to Spiritual Weapon, a non-concentration summoning spell, which can provide a little bit of extra DPS if it doesn't immediately die in high-level encounters. Could have some utility. We also do gain access to level 2 spells, as I said, and you have a few options here. Want a permanent poison resistance? Get protection from poison that you only have to cast every long rest. It is going to cost a level 2 spell slot though, which is going to be in short supply with this build, so you may want to consider your options on that, but hey, it is an option. Also, Aid for more base HP could be useful as well. And finally, at level 6 of Paladin, we are going to be getting Aura of Protection. Now, you may think that with, it says a +0 bonus there, but it's equal to your Charisma modifier. You may think that with our lower Charisma score, this may not be worth it. And honestly, you could be right. If you find that you want to keep your Charisma score on a bit on the lower side, then you might want to drop this 6th level of Paladin altogether. And honestly, I could totally see it. Take a 7th level of Barbarian for a little bit more there, a bit more HP, and an extra rage charge, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, but also there are other interesting level 1 dips, like Fighter for second wind, or perhaps even... it's probably just Fighter. Yeah, I can't think of many others right off the top of my head. Maybe Bard? You can taunt enemies as well. Could be something there. But yeah, this 6th level of Bard is optional, that you can fill in with a level 1 dip or something else if you desire. Hell, a 1 level dip into Sorcerer might even be good for Shield. Actually, maybe do that. But I'll keep the level 6 for Barbarian here to get... Paladin, sorry, I'm going to keep getting that mixed up. Just in case you do want to get a bit more out of your Charisma by jostling around the stats, and picking up Aura of Protection would be amazing if you do, because it's going to help you with a few things along the way, for both you and your allies. So, if you want to kind of pick up, like I say, something like the Amulet of Greater Constitution and bump up your Charisma later, then having Aura of Protection around can be good. You also do get to prepare an extra spell. Up to you what you want to take, really doesn't matter. Now, with all of that said and done, you could go to level 7 of Conquest Paladin to get Aura of Conquest, meaning that you emanate a menacing aura in every direction, causing creatures that are frightened of you to have their movement speed reduced to 0. There's also some extra psychic damage in there as well, if you decide you want to go down that route. But we're going to be jumping back to Barbarian to get a few things, namely Danger Sense, giving you advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells, and surfaces. Great stuff there, makes you even tankier against things like Fireball. And then obviously Reckless Attack, giving us advantage on attack rolls, but enemies also have advantage against us until our next turn. We can activate this as a reaction, and again, it's basically one of the best utility things in the game. I know having advantage to hit us can be a bit of an issue with that lower constitution, but again, we're still going to be a very tanky Barbarian at the end of the day. It's not a huge deal. Next up, at Barbarian level 3, we get to choose our subclass. Now, obviously, there is Wildheart and Berserker, two classic options. Wildheart can make you even tankier, or to give you a bunch of other effects. Berserker can make your bonus action a bit more useful with throwing and such like that. However, we're going to be using Wild Magic today, because in 200 builds, I've only used it 5 times. This is the 6th time, I think. I'll change the list in a minute. So, Wild Magic is an amazing subclass, actually, but I don't think it's enough credit for Barbarians. You get the ability to Wild Magic Rage, allowing you to enter a rage that allows you to get some additional benefits that are randomly rolled, similar to the Sorcerer thing. But where Sorcerer's Wild Magic has negative effects on there that can actually be detrimental, pretty much all of the Wild Magic Barbarians rage effects are positive, and there's even a couple that I would say are really, really on theme for this build, namely the one that I got in testing, which is the ability to fire a beam of radiant energy like a Kamehameha at your foes. Like, you basically get like a minus sunbeam as a barbarian, which feels so on theme, but there's also things like summoning exploding spiritual beings called flumps. There is the ability to add force damage to your attacks, summoning dark tendrils that damage your enemies and slow them down. There's some really cool effects in here, and every time you rage, it's a party, and I love the way that this synergizes with Paladin. Now, I will say, because I can't remember if this has been patched out of the game yet, so I will quickly make a disclaimer here. There is sometimes a bug that could potentially happen that has been video evidence provided of this before, where certain wild magic rage things will allow you to cast spells while raging. Pretty sure that's been patched out, but if it hasn't, maybe look to take advantage of that. You're also going to gain access to Magical Awareness. As a bonus action, anyone within range for the next turn adds their proficiency bonus to saving throws against spells. Stack this with your aura, and you've got a nice little effect for a turn. Is it the best ability? Absolutely not, but it exists. Personally, I would make this last at least 3 turns if I was buffing this class. Just saying. Next up, at Barbarian level 4, we do get access to our second feat, and it depends here what you've kind of done. If you went for the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, you might not feel the need to bump your strength up to a total of 20 here, so you don't need to do that. You can bump up your dexterity for more AC if maybe you decide to go with light armor. Constitution would probably be my pick, either Constitution or Charisma if you're not doing strength. I am doing strength here, so we're going to bump that up. But again, Potion of Everlasting Vigor, maybe choose something else like Con or Charisma. At Barbarian level 5, unfortunately this is a bit of a meh level. We get extra attack here, but it doesn't stack with the Paladin extra attack. Boo. However, we do get fast movement, increasing our movement speed by 3 meters, which is nice. And finally, at Barbarian level 6, we gain an extra rage charge, as well as one of the coolest things that makes these two subclasses synergize really nicely. We get Bolstering Magic Boon, giving us or an ally a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and ability checks. That helps with Great Weapon Master, or if we want it to, if we are concentrating on a spell and because we don't want to rage yet, that also helps with the concentration save. So that's also there. However, the big ticket items are Bolstering Magic level 1 and Bolstering Magic level 2, allowing us to recover a level 1 or level 2 spell slot once per long rest each. Yeah, okay, it's not that impressive, but it's still cool. Okay, we only have up to level 2 spell slots as a paladin with this build, so being able to basically get an extra bit of resources per long rest without having to actually long rest just feels kind of nice, and you can recover those spell slots mid-combat. Yes, it's the cost of an action, but we actually have a lot of bonus action stuff we can do, so it might not always feel like a waste of a turn. So I just love the idea that the two classes can synergize just that little bit with this feature that in most cases is kind of useless because we don't really get spell slots as a barbarian normally, and usually spending an action as a barbarian to do this for one of your allies, which again, remember, if you don't attack, can end your rage. Yeah, you know, I can see why this is a problem, but for us, recovering our smite spell slots, hey, more smites is more damage, we like that. So, let's keep going. And that is the build. Overall, what you're getting out of this. Now, I know that through the leveling scheme, I was saying a lot of things like this and that, and like making caveats and excuses and kind of saying, this isn't too useful. But let me be clear. We are a massively offensive paladin still. We can still smite with level 2 slots, giving us a big dollop of damage, up to 52. As well, on top of that, we are also a massively defensive barbarian, getting the wild magic rage effects to give us a bunch of extra buffs, as well as the fact that we are just going to be extremely tanky when we rage. We also get the ability to heal ourselves quite consistently with Lay on Hands, being able to buff ourselves with our Oath of Conquest abilities, as well as just giving us a lot of general utility, or of protection, giving us a little bit of a bump. But again, if you really want to optimize this setup, you are going to have to play around with the stats a little bit and maybe get some stat boosting equipment to really make this build shine. Otherwise, at the moment, this will work brilliantly for just a casual playthrough, and I think that's where it works the best. I don't think this build is taking on honor mode anytime soon, but again, with a bit of optimization, it can definitely smack on the other difficulties. I would say this build as is even still works on Tactician, because I test all my builds on Tactician. And this thing does shred. It really, really can. Even with the low-level smites, this thing can really, really hit hard and just take the damage back as well. It's just... it does work. Again, it's not as synergistic as maybe most multi-classes would like to be, but this still does the job, and it does its job well. So, let's look at the rest of the... let's look at the equipment to finish off this build. So, first up, our weapon of choice is the Punch Drunk Bastard. I know I wanted to get a club in this build, because again, the idea of like having like this almost like holy weapon that is like meant to be non-lethal, so it's like just this basic club. Like, this guy is going to beat the crap out of you, but he's not going to kill you. That's against his faith. So, this build is probably actually going to be doing non-lethal damage. Let's just toggle that one on. So, with this, you're going to get a few things. Namely, while you are drunk, so again, we have a bit of a thing for the bottle. While you are drunk, you have an advantage on attack rolls. That's pretty good. That means we don't have to worry too much about using things like Reckless Attack if we like. You also create a blast with each attack, dealing 1d4 thunder damage in a range of 3 meters. So it's more damage overall. I've also buffed this with the Drakethroat Glaive's Thunder buff to give it an extra +1, as this now is a +2 weapon, with an extra 1d4 of thunder damage on top. So with each attack, all being with advantage, you're going to be dealing 2d4 thunder damage on top of the usual 1d8 +6. And it also comes with Tenacity, meaning that even if you miss, you still deal bludgeoning damage anyway. So overall, this is quite a fun weapon to use that gives it a bit of flavour, but any good endgame two-handed weapon is going to work great. Baldurin's Giant Slayer, Foe Breaker, Corpse Grinder. Those are all the ones I can name off the top of my head, but they're good. They're very, very good. Moving on to the headpiece, we have the the Bone Spike Helmet. I call it the Menacing Helmet because its best feature is Menacing Attack. But whenever we rage, hostile creatures within 3 meters must succeed a Wisdom save or take 2 to 8 psychic damage. If they save, they still take half the damage. This kind of plays into that fear aspect, but as soon as you get serious and get angry, people are going to be afraid of you, and as such they take that bit of psychic damage, which again synergizes nicely eventually with our Oath of Conquest features, where you actually make them frightened. It all feels fun. You also gain a +2 to Intimidation. Nice, we like that again for our funny Barbarian checks. And finally, Menacing Attack. Now we're not reliant on any of our features. Every single attack we can do at least once per turn will have a chance to inflict the frightened condition, and this also comes with extra damage on top as well. So every attack, basically once per turn, you can use this, have a chance to inflict fear, and do a bit of extra damage. Honestly, absolutely amazing. It's so good for this build that I had to include it here. But in the early game, you can pick up Diadem of Arcane Synergy. We have a lot of ways of inflicting status conditions, namely fear, and so we can use that to make it so that Arcane Synergy will give our weapon attacks a little bit of a buff based on our spellcasting modifier. Again, if you put slightly more charisma into this build, you can get a bit more out of this, maybe going for that 14 charisma and dumping wisdom if you really wanted to go down that route to just get that little bit of extra damage in the early game. But heck, even a +1 in the early game. But even a +1 in the early game can still be quite potent, and even up to a +2 will be really good. So I feel like the Diadem does work for the early game, but things like the Helmet of Arcane Acuity can also work in the kind of mid game as well, if you want to try and get a bit more out of your spells. But otherwise, the Diadem will do just fine. Next up, Cloak of Protection. This build kind of needs a bit more for its armor class, so this just helps with that. Next up, we also have the Luminous Armour. Again, I didn't want to just say, oh yeah, we're smiting as a barbarian and calling it a day. I wanted to give it a little bit more, and the Luminous Armour does that. Whenever we deal radiant damage, we cause a Radiant Shockwave. That Radiant Shockwave will inflict Radiating Orb to foes in a 3-meter radius. Radiating Orb makes it so the affected entity has a -1 to attack rolls for each remaining turn, and it also sheds a bright light in the area surrounding it. It reduces the duration by 2 each time the entity makes an attack. So by doing a Divine Smite, we're going to be able to spread this Radiant Orb effect, which makes us even harder to hit. We have decent AC with this build, around 18, which isn't the highest, but with Radiating Orb lowering our enemy's chance to hit, this can be really, really good. So overall, it just adds that little bit of extra to Divine Smite that makes it feel a bit more worth it. Combining this with the Luminous Gloves to make it so that when we deal radiant damage, the target that we hit gets 2 turns of Radiating Orb for a total of 3 with the gloves and the armor. That means just for hitting our enemy with a Divine Smite, they have a -3% or -3 to their attack roll against us on their next attack, with that becoming a -1 after that initial attack. So overall, it gives us a bit more defensive utility. So when we actually take a hit, we are going to be taking less damage, and that's even if we take a hit at all with all this going on. And again, that's why we want to make sure that we're not relying too hard on extra attack, because all this is a bit pointless when the enemy has advantage to hit us, which is why we have so many different ways, other than reckless attack, of gaining advantage. And finally, because we will be kind of making use of the drunk condition, or the alcohol condition as it's actually labelled in game, that means we're going to be taking a disadvantage on charisma and dexterity checks. Those dexterity checks can be quite important, so we're going to be going for the acrobatic shoes to give us advantage on dex saving throws. Now technically we do get this with danger sense. Oh shit, yeah we do. Whoops, these boots are totally useless. I've just made a mistake. What can I suggest in place of these? Well, there is the Boots of Speed, which will allow you to dash as a bonus action. For a Barbarian, that could be really, really good. There's also the Boots of Reverberation, the Boots of Stormy Clamor, they're actually called, which would allow you to inflict Reverberation in addition to Radiating Orb with each of your attacks. I can't believe I forgot about Danger Sense. You know what, screw it, we're doing this all this is all staying in the video, because I'm very tired and I don't feel like making any specific edits. So we're just gonna go with this. So yeah, maybe. But these are an early game option, so if you decide to level up with the Paladin levels first, so you don't actually have Danger Sense at level 2, these could be great into the early game, but any late game piece of armor that's good for your feet, even the Boots of Persistence, because they're not actually heavy armor, could work really, really nicely for this build. So, but yeah, maybe replace this with something else if you do decide to take that second level of Barbarian. Like I said, there's many great options out there. If you've been watching this channel enough, you know what the other options are. I can't believe I made that mistake. This feels like when I used to make builds like 6 months ago, where I would just, or even like when I first started, where I would just screw up constantly. I feel like I've done that a bit in this video. Ah, well. This is what you're here for. This is the content you subscribed for. I'm sure. 100%. Scuff. Anyways, moving on. For our amulet, I've gone with the Spell Savant amulet, giving us an additional level 2 spell slot, meaning that now we have 3 level 2 spell slots per long rest. Technically 4 with Bolstering Magic. Also, that means we technically have 5 level 1 spell slots with Bolstering Magic. That is a decent chunk of smites. So, you know, that's 9 smites per long rest. Not bad. We also do gain access to these 2 rings. We have the Callous Glow Ring, which gives the wearer, which makes it so the wearer deals an additional 2 points of radiant damage. The description is slightly wrong. It does specify that it's radiant damage against creatures that are illuminated. Radiating Orb illuminates creatures, meaning that we just get more damage from our damage. And finally, I love including this ring on any of my Wild Magic Barbarian builds, the Ring of Blink. Basically, Blink is one of the very few spells that we can cast and will still work with Rage. As an action, you can make it so that at the end of every turn, you roll a d20. On an 11 or higher, so about a 50% chance, you vanish into the ethereal plane, and while there, you cannot be seen or harmed in this world. What's more chaotic than a teleporting barbarian paladin? Not much else, so use the Ring of Blink for a bit of extra shenanigans, and again, possibly making yourself even more tanky. Remember, you can't cast it while you're raging, but you can cast it before, and because this is an action and raging is a bonus action, you can do both on your first turn of combat and really amp up your defensive utility. For our camp clothing here, I've gone with the Baldur's Gate Robe version 1 from Fear Taylor's Camp Clothing, which is available to all platforms, and the Camp Boots from the Citizens Clothing mod, which is also available on consoles. And for the dye, I am using the Faerunian Colors mods Talos dye, which I felt like was pretty fun for this build. It gives us that kind of black and gold feel, which feels like a high-ranking church official who's also a little bit insane. But, you know, I felt like that felt kind of fun to me. It's kind of got that, like, priest robes, but with gilded gold accents. I mean, I don't know. I think it kind of looks cool to me. Feel free to disagree. But yes, that is the build. And overall, the verdict is you're going to be long resting a lot. Yes, so obviously if you want to get the most damage out of this build, you're going to be wanting to Divine Smite a lot. And again, this build does a lot of damage. The only real issue is the resource management side of things. But that is kind of mitigated by the fact that at the end of the day, you are still a barbarian. Your main goal is to be tanky, and you can still deal massive amounts of damage each turn. With the numerous ways we have to get advantage, you are going to be able to get off Great Weapon Master quite a bit. Menacing Attack will work great in place of a Smite. If you do run out of them, that's still extra damage on all of your attacks, and just everything stacked together is going to make it so that you do massive damage. So at the end of the day, and again, that's not even taking into account the Wild Magic rage effects. You could be getting the bolts of radiant light, you could be getting other things that will bolster your ability to, you know, deal damage and have interesting abilities. I think the most kind of meh ability that you get from this is like the ability to teleport as a bonus action, which is still really good. Like, again, what's more chaotic than a teleporting barbarian paladin? So, you know, overall, I do think this can work really, really well. Again, I totally forgot that the acrobat shoes are useless. Replace those with anything. But otherwise, you've got a lot to work with here. Feel free to mess about with this build. Again, you're getting the best of both worlds when it comes to Barbarian and Paladin here. You just got to make sure that you're managing your resources effectively. And in tabletop, where long rests might not be as common, I wouldn't recommend this build. But in BG3, where you can long rest as long as you have the supplies, long rest a lot. Basically, long rest before every major encounter. I know that seems like a waste of resources, but to be honest, in most playthroughs of BG3, if you don't have more camp supplies that you know what to do with by the time you get to Act 3, then you're doing it wrong. Loot everything. Trust me, it's worth it. But yeah, I think that is going to do it for me. Not much else to say here. In fact, the combat footage was pretty short. But again, as I said with the beginning of this build, let me know what else you want to see on this channel. Maybe I'll actually listen this time. Ah, man. But yeah, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.